Welcome. My name is Wendell Collins, and I'm Director of Development for the School of Data Science. I'd like to welcome you to our First Friday webinar series. This month's is the last one for 2021, and we welcome back Renée Cummings, who was one of our early First Friday speakers. Renée is the data activist in residence at the School of Data Science, the first and maybe one of the only in the country. And we also welcome John Nisi, who runs the Microsoft Cloud business and focuses on strategy and digital transformation for Microsoft and its many clients and customers. We're going to turn it over to Renée to kick off a conversation. Just want to let the audience know that we're going to have Q&A about 45 minutes into the program, around 11:45. So if you have questions you'd like to have the speakers address after their conversation, please put those in the Q&A and we'll take them in the order that we receive. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Renée and welcome.
Thank you, Wendell, and welcome, and thank you for joining us. I'm Renée Cummings. I'm a criminologist, AI ethicist, and yes, the first data activist in residence at the School of Data Science here at UVA. It's such an honor, privilege, and pleasure to be hosting this extraordinary series, First Friday, where all the absolutely amazing people in data science meet. Our guest today is no stranger to UVA. Actually, he's part of the UVA family and such a stellar example of what this great institution can produce. Let's welcome John Nisi, General Manager and COO of US Cloud at Microsoft for Data and AI. It is such a pleasure to have this conversation with you, John. John, I know you are a graduate from UVA. Tell us why you chose UVA and how was that experience?
Well, thank you so much for the intro, and it's absolutely pleasure and honor to be here with you and anyone else tuning in today. Yeah, so I come from a low society economical background, first generation college student, very much the family through Ellis Island, and we had a good childhood, but there was a lot of scraping at times, and I felt that at a young age, just computers kind of spoke to me, and the more I could get my hands on them, which the school didn't have them, but we would find access through public libraries and things, get my hand on computers. That was really where I started to just find my passion. My mother was a part-time bookkeeper. I would offer to punch in the numbers for her each week just so I could type on a keyboard. And so when I started looking at colleges, I felt this passion, this drive for computer science, and applied to a whole bunch of schools. And UVA kept coming up on this list as an unbelievable university where you can get a diversity of discipline. How many schools do they have? And so when I looked and I went and visited Carnegie Mellon and MIT for comp sci, it was comp sci all the way. And then when I visited UVA, outside of the amazing grounds, of course, it was the breadth. It was diversity of curriculum. It was, hey, take something in engineering, but oh, by the way, we have this McIntyre School of Commerce, and oh, by the way, we have this and that. And at that time we didn't have School of Data Science, which would have been an absolute dream. So I would say that my decisions were based on looking for something that could help me find even more passions. And then there was a great financial aspect to it as well. UVA just has this ability to find financial aid to help those who need to come in. I often remind myself of my father, who worked in a sheet metal shop. He would go to work from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. and come home and take night classes because it was another kid in school, and helped us with financial aid so I could attend UVA. So it was those pieces together became the perfect spot for me to try and learn and grow and change and figure out what was next for me. I would say the experience bumpy at times, very bumpy, especially out of the gate. Coming into engineering school, it was very obvious there were gaps in what I knew, what I could get my hands on, what I had exposure to, and so bit of struggle in the beginning until really starting to meet and lean on great people like Don Brown and Bill Shearer, who were my advisors in the e-school, spent some time on summer courses as well, and then finally found systems engineering, comp sci, and a little MIS from McIntyre, which is where I ended up studying. So I look back and every moment of UVA, even the challenging ones, the falls, the rise after the falls, and certainly what I was able to learn. It was the most transformational years of my life, easily.
I know you can definitely hear the love for UVA in your voice, and it's still there. But I also was told that you found love at UVA as well. And yesterday I read that beautiful tribute to your wife on LinkedIn, and I know it's a very powerful connection that you both share. So if you're comfortable sharing the story in this space, tell us how it happened and how that love has shaped your life today.
That is very, very true. I'll tell you, so what the engineering school looks like now with women in technology and women in STEM was very different back then. So I would say, it was probably 80-90%, I don't know the exact number, of men. But when you run into a woman who challenged me, always made me chase to try and keep up with her work ethic, with her capabilities, with her insight, I was hooked from the start. But I will tell you, it was the 8 a.m. horrible calculus class, Monday through Friday, where I first met Jen and asked her on a date. She frankly said no, absolutely no. Which then I continued to pursue that for a little bit until I finally got her to go out with me, and the rest is history. 3 kids, 1 in high school, 2 girls in 8th and 7th grade, and yeah, she's also at Microsoft. She has worked in some of our greatest innovation areas around blockchain, quantum computing, and now she actually runs our business applications business for the Americas, for our professional services arm. So yeah, the UVA and the Microsoft connections are very strong in our house.
I can see all is fair in love and tech, right?
That's right.
So I know you're super passionate about the School of Data Science and the Jefferson Trust. And I also read an amazing interview with the Jefferson Trust, the work that you're doing there. And I know our listeners would be excited to hear about that. So do you mind sharing some of that work with the School of Data Science and the Trust?
Of course, yeah. I mean, I remember this was years ago. A friend called who was involved with Jefferson Trust and said, "Hey, John, we got this grant proposal from the school. They want to start considering a program in data science. They're looking for this amount of money to drive this. Could you look at this?" And so here I am, head down, 100% of my time at work. And so this was the first opportunity to pick my head up and re-engage with the community, and especially around an area that was so passionate, but also learn about the Jeff Trust. So got on with President Sullivan and the CIO, and we talked through what the plan was, and that proposal was granted. That started the amazing journey to where Don and Phil Bourne have taken the school today, and I'm just ecstatic on anything that we can do to give back to the School of Data Science, School of Engineering, and the whole university. And I think that's why Jen and I got involved with the Jeff Trust, because the whole purpose of this donor-led giving is simply to allow the community, Charlottesville community, Albemarle community, university community, to come and say, I want to try, I want to explore, I want to test, I have this idea. And in real life, ideas take money. And so there's this grant system where it can come apply for a grant, whether it's research, whether it's we funded last year was an Albemarle County deaf opera. So it was an inclusive opera that was done for folks who had a hearing disability, who could come and enjoy the art. So it's not technology wholly focused, it's across anything that helps President Ryan's mission of making the community and the university, rise up and make better humans for the world. And that's what I love so much about the Jeff Trust is the ability to target that support by resources, by mentors, by folks who can lean in and help make connections, or even put hands on keyboards at times. So together, bringing those together, the School of Data Science, a big passion, and the ability to help entrepreneurs and help those who are trying to help the community, it's the perfect combination for sure. But when I know why the school is so passionate to me. You've come through your journey and your unbelievable experience in this space. I'm curious what led you to look at data activism, and specifically what drew you to that at UVA, because you are the only, as far as we know, data activist in residence, and I think it's such a monumental breakthrough focus and position. How'd you find your way to Charlottesville?
Oh, thank you for that question, and a fantastic question as well. I think I was actually doing a speaking engagement, and one of the scientists who was on the panel with me referred to me as the Jedi Queen of AI, speaking to justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And then I saw this ad that was positioned as data activist, and it was something that I was researching at the time, and many of those residencies for data activists were in Europe. So when I saw this, I said, this is definitely a school that is committed to justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And this is definitely a place that I wanted to be, because I always felt that the data activists and the AI ethicists are, the conscience of the data scientists. And for me, my work in AI is about stretching the ethical imagination of data science by using frameworks that really commit to justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. So that is what brought me here. I've been here for over a year, and let me tell you, it is an honor to be the first. It is an honor to be part of this school, and it's really a great environment because so much is happening, and I am so confident that very soon that we are going to be leading when it comes to data ethics and justice here at UVA.
Couldn't agree more. And stretching the ethical creativity is so brilliant. So to become that leader, what are some of the top goals you have on your desk or your whiteboard, long-term initiatives, goals that you want to achieve at your time here?
All right, certainly. So at the moment, I'm working with two very brilliant data scientists, and they are graduates of the data science program. And we're working on finalizing this tool that I conceptualized, which gives an algorithmic or digital force score to the kind, the quality, of algorithms that are being deployed on the streets by the police. It really is about surveillance technology, and it's about ways in which that we can reimagine the relationships between police and communities, and ways in which we can bring communities into the conversation about technology and how technology is being used. And a great way to make comparison to the kinds of budgets that police departments across the US are expending on technology versus the kind of investments or the lack of investments in many of our communities that are underserved and high needs. I'm also committed to public interest technology, and proud to say that with John Goodall from the School of Engineering, I am co-director of UVA's public interest tech movement here. And it's something that we are very passionate about, because we want to build this momentum of data and AI in benefit, in service of the public interest. And I believe that data scientists are architects of our future, and engineers and data scientists and just anyone working in tech needs to understand that role and that commitment, and to understand that they have a very unique position, of course, as custodians of the public good, and also looking forward to working with the Center for Data Ethics and Justice. That is something that I want to see happen, and I'm hoping that I can transition from data activists to working with the Center for Data Ethics and Justice. So now let's talk a little bit about data and society and the impact of technology on the world, and of course, tech for good. And you know that I'm passionate about the transformative power of AI, its potential and just its promise. And I know you're also passionate and excited about ethical AI and responsible AI and justice, equity, and inclusion. So I want you to tell me, what would you consider to be a good initiative that speaks to tech for good and something that excites you?
Yeah, where I focus, and again, a lot of our passions are driven by personal experience and lived experiences, and it's around education. It's around ensuring equity. It's around ensuring that regardless of what you can get your hands on and your environment that you're learning in, that everyone has a fair shot. And it might not be to learn something, but it's to develop the love of learning, because the love of learning is the thing that we can teach anyone, or anyone has that inside of them, and it just needs to be sparked. And so when I look at some of the examples where we've seen tech sort of, break through and help in this space, I think of major school system in the United States, 5 high schools, 30,000 people, and they were labeled by the government as a dropout factory. They were graduating only 55% of their kids, and some work was done with our company, some partners, and the school system to start to look across data signals that we could have and try to think about, could you absolutely try to flag, predict, take an action on somebody that was struggling? And so when you take together wellness and grades and socioeconomical data that was opted in by the school system, you can connect these silos across these high schools, across administration, across the county. And it was work that was done, took about 5 years, but that school system graduated from 55%, graduated 82.6% of their kids. Once they started to understand, okay, this data doesn't tell us who's going to pass or fail. It doesn't tell us who should get resources and assets or who's worth it. This tells us that we might have a child struggling. And so we can engage guidance counselors, we can engage tutors, we can engage multiple conversations, we can engage parents. And so I start to see that sort of solution, that technology really helping, because if we don't have that base, that common base of folks who have access and equity to education, downstream, are the bigger challenges we face on a global scale, and not creating that foundation early is really something I think about a lot, and that I'm happy about is, an effort that Microsoft and UNICEF have actually built together called the Learning Passport. So right before COVID, we were already working on this. There were displaced refugee children that just have no access. We started putting in a system for them. We accelerated when COVID hit because the estimates put it over 1.5 billion students were hit by school closures. So we created this capability that folks could go get access and learn across all of any area they wanted to dive into. The struggle then becomes, well, what if you don't have broadband? What if you don't have access? And that's where, each time you tackle the next possible, challenge to getting equity in education, you get to the next hard rock, and that was broadband, which is why, we're trying to cut the number of US citizens who don't have access down 10% by the end of next year. And then we'll do another 10%, another 10%, but it takes a lot of investment, a lot of resource, and a lot of focus to do that. But I believe that technology invested early to enable the love of learning is absolutely where I think most of the good can happen, because you're infusing that at the beginning of someone's life journey and what their experiences would be.
Definitely.
I'd love to hear your perspective, though. We have so much potential and opportunity, like you said in the beginning, and of course there's risk and there's issues. But is there something that makes you really hopeful for the future on this type of technology?
Definitely. Well, first of all, to hear you speak about equity in education, that makes me hopeful, because it's something that we've got to do when it comes to bridging that digital divide and understanding that there are communities out there where there are young people who just need the access and who need the opportunity and who need the resources. So that makes me hopeful. Also, what makes me hopeful is the fact that we have now come to the understanding for us to have, trustworthy, responsible AI, it needs to be a mature technology. And that maturity comes from the interdisciplinary collaborations and cross-sector collaborations, which are very important. So now we're seeing criminologists, sociologists, psychologists, educators, just everyone inviting themselves to this big data party, right? This big AI party. And that gives me hope because there's also this growing community of data activism and AI ethics that's really speaking to data rights as civil rights and persons starting to understand the power of their data and communities starting to see themselves as producers of knowledge. So I think the conversation is moving out of academia, it's moving out of the big tech companies, it's moving out of the suites and it's hitting the streets. And I'm really happy that I'm part of that conversation and really generating more thinking and more perspective, more critical perspectives around that. So I'm very hopeful. And of course, the School of Data Science that's giving me the opportunity to even bring more hope to the spaces that I go and the places and the people that I speak to. Now let's talk about sustainability. And I know you are very committed to sustainability. So within the context of technology, what does sustainability mean to you? And what do you plan to do with that platform?
Yeah, I think that, sort of growing up in the woods, it definitely took for advantage, the wonderful amount and access to clean water, to clean, waste. This is something that, now that I'm in New York, so I'm about an hour north of the city in the Hudson Valley. It's a rolling hills and landscapes. There's even horse country up here around the Hudson River, but I mean, I've always wanted to protect. I've always wanted to see proper usage. I think that it's become even more and more important. So I spent 5 years as our worldwide CTO for data and AI, traveling around the globe, and taking in, all of the impact that you see. And, it comes back, it's think locally, think globally, act locally is where my head's at on this. And so, I think a lot about the commitments that my company's made. Carbon negative by 2030, water positive by 2030, zero waste by 2030. I mean, these are huge goals for a company with almost 200,000 employees operating across the globe. But what I really enjoy is protect more land than we use by 2030 is also a critical one. So when I look across those goals and I start to think, we have to do the intentional protection, sustainability. We have to get that front and center and we have to work it. Technology is where we can solve these problems. And so when I look at some of the technology that allows you to record, to reduce, to get your footprint, to put your goals out there publicly and track them internally and bring every aspect of your supply chain or your internal IT or your data centers into that, so you can now see. It's funny that, we talk to so many customers every month, and a lot of those conversations are, could you just help me understand where I'm at or validate where I think I'm at? Because of the technology to bring this together. I mean, this, it's a big data problem, right? It's a siloed system, disparate formats, no standard. It's a data problem. And when you bring that all together, and then you can start to see, now you can start to run intelligence. Now you can start to prescript and prescribe. And that's the critical part. Predict where you're going so you can prescribe actions to make those changes across those sustainability tenets. And that is where I think big data lakes, giant models with many parameters are really going to help companies tune with, of course, all of the challenges we think we face in these type of modeling scenarios having to be mitigated, at the front.
Definitely. And of course, without sustainability, we have no future. So data for sustainability is definitely very powerful. So we know where there is great reward, when it comes to technology and data and AI, there is also great risk. And especially in the criminal justice system where we've seen some of those risks. So while we can use AI and data to do great things when it comes to policy and evidence-based decisions and data-driven solutions in criminal justice, we have also seen risk assessment tools that have just really, perpetrated more, systemic racism, bias, and discrimination in criminal justice. You are committed to responsible AI. And I really want to get from you, what is your take? What is your perspective on what responsible AI should feel like?
Yeah, we think about this a lot. We have this committee at Microsoft called AI and Ethic Effect in Engineering and Research. A chief architect of mine once said to me, John, it's way harder owning AI than it is creating AI. And he's absolutely right. We're commoditizing the creation of models, the leveraging of models, the pouring data into some place where we can reason over it. But the moment that that's used for a decision, that's when you're owning that AI. And that means it takes on a life of its own. And you have to have, we look across many of the aspects you mentioned. We look about accountability, who's making the decision and why. Transparency, you cannot have this box you can't see into about how a decision was made. You have to have audibility and traceability. But with all of that, you need to maintain privacy. And that's a non-negotiable at our company. But we also see that if you play that balancing act of privacy versus accuracy, you have to lean on privacy over accuracy. And then you have to have humans in the chain of decision making, even when it's AI based. So when we look across how to protect people, how to protect rights, because AI will enable us if we do it right. Now, we all know there's bad actors out there. There's nation state actors. There's many folks who want to monetize, weaponize, and capitalize. And so when I think about how do we do this right, it's the person at the center, either as you said, the provider of their data, and it's certainly the people who are consumers of the decision, of the prediction, of the aspect of whatever that model is going to predict, tell, or send to someone. You have to be thinking about how are they impacted? Is it fair use? Is it a harmful scenario? Could it be? We listen to so many ideas around the world of companies and customers who say, got a brilliant idea, here's what we're going to do. And the first conversation is, have you thought about transparency, reliability, accountability, privacy, security? You have to have those conversations at ideation, not before some model's about to go out on the internet and make decisions for folks. So I see it across with the human at the center, and I see it as it's a non-negotiable upfront in the system. And I think that, folks going through the School of Data Science at UVA, with the focus on ethics, with the interdisciplinary school without walls, I think they have a great opportunity to absolutely be leaders in the industry on this. I'd ask you though, are there any challenges you're seeing ahead in the UVA data science community or broader, since you have such a wide aperture, that we can prepare for and help solve today?
I think at UVA, and I've spent the last 2 semesters lecturing online on big data ethics in the online masters in data science. And I think from the students, I think what I got from them is, what can we do and how could we do it? And how do we do it in real time? And how do we do ethical AI within the constraints of what it means to operate within an organization? And I think one of the things that I always say is, we've got to live in the ethical moment. And when I speak to students, and when I speak just generally, I speak a lot about ethical vigilance. And ethical vigilance means that you're not going to get everything right, but at least you have the consciousness and the thinking and the perspectives and the understanding to know what you've got to do. And if you can get it done, to ask a question or to bring those stakeholders in to deal with that. So for me, it's always about vigilance. It's almost always about due process. And it's also about thinking in ways in which we can always protect, reduce the harm, duty of care. And of course, it's about fairness, and it's about justice, and it's about those interdisciplinary collaborations that help us create those robust and rigorous guardrails that are required to ensure that we get responsible AI from design and development. I think the challenge is this, it's the opacity of the technology, the fact that we still don't know everything that's going on in the black box, and we're using something that we don't know everything about, and then trying to create this responsible and transparent and explainable framework. I think what we've got to do is really bring more and more communities into the conversation. And I always say that each of us represents several different communities, and all of those communities need to have a voice in how this technology is being designed. So I think, as I've said to you before, there's really a bold and really brilliant community of AI ethicists out there, and they're doing really extraordinary work. And the fact that the School of Data Science is committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion is a great platform and a great place to start. And it's a great protection in itself. So let's talk a little more about education. And I know you spoke about that commitment to equity when it comes to education. And you are also really driving through the many organizations you work with, this movement for tech for good in education. So what are the exciting innovations that you are seeing in tech for good within education or any other discipline?
Yeah, I think there's so much there, and education is the right to learn and grow, and access to that is critical. So I think what I'm excited about is when I see some things like we talked about bandwidth for a moment, right? We have a program called Airband, which is taking TV white space to broadcast Wi-Fi into communities that struggle with broadband, right? It's expensive to convince a company to go lay down some wires, but TV is ubiquitous here. And if we could provide broadband to those rural and those underserved areas, imagine, the access suddenly, right? Hybrid work is here to stay, and that impacts everyone in your household. If you have to go somewhere to work, you need care for children. If you can hybrid work, then your child can hybrid learn, or you can take care of making sure your child gets education. So these are intertwined. So giving that access so that regardless of what's next with COVID or what's around the corner, we don't have these sort of fallback moments as a society. I think that the world is as global as it's ever been and will continue to be. And I look at things like Translator, being able to connect folks with these, and what's behind a great translator is a massive amount of data with a massive machine learning model that could have billions of parameters. We just jointly shipped a new 530 billion parameter model. So imagine an Excel spreadsheet with 530 billion columns. That's what we're talking about here. But it allows you to translate, which is a game changer for students who may not be first language in whichever country they're in, speaking a different language than what's spoken in the classroom, having access to that, and more importantly, inside the flow of where they're learning, right? Live transcription in the classroom. That's the exciting things that when I look at these technology breakthroughs and the investments, and I talked a bit about where we want to make access to education. We're following suit with many of the universities and many of the learning platforms that access to education just has to be ubiquitous and has to be accessible. And again, falling back on, can you understand it? Can you consume it? Can you communicate? And do you have what you need from a technology perspective to consume? So, those are just some of the amazing breakthroughs when I look at what's happening in deep neural networks and these mega models that will really start to show up in a flow of a child. It shouldn't be that I'm using technology to learn. It should be that technology enables my ability and love of learning. And that's what I love to see. We at my kids' school, they're starting to stand down the ability to have a computer lab. Oh, you come to the computer lab, you get to spend 40 minutes a week and you do something computer. No, you're in your classroom, you're learning. You use technology if it enables the lesson and the motion and what you're trying to grow that day. And I think that's the culture in the future I want to see, but those breakthroughs in technologies have to be there to enable it. Now, my focus is very much K through 12 as my kids are in 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. But I think a bit about, higher education and, inequity earlier on and how that impacts you as you get to higher education. I'm just wondering if you've, taken that into your remit, how have you observed that and really start to bring that together through your activism role?
Definitely. I think much of what I do is about democratizing the data and bringing more diverse groups into the conversation about AI. And I think there's a program that you do, which is Accelerate America, the Accelerate America program. Maybe you just want to share just a little bit on that before I move on.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a free program that was put in place at the board level of Microsoft, which just means it's infused in everything we do, becomes part of DNA for our company. And it's all about skilling. It's a free program where individuals who want a desire to learn and grow and change skills, maybe take on some technology skills or areas around technology, but it creates a learning path based on what you want to do at the end of the day, what you're interested in, gives you a certificate, and we bring you along a learning course with the courses, the instructors, the support along the way, and it's explicitly focused and prioritized on underserved and underrepresented communities where equity of access to education is one of the biggest problems they may be facing in reskilling for the workforce, or even just joining the workforce coming out of whatever level of education they have. So it's free, it's meant for a digital world, and it's something that, like I said, is simply out there from our company to help in every way possible.
Now, I talk a lot about reimagining data, and I know at Microsoft, you have this Reimagine Microsoft event. So maybe you'd like just to share a little bit on that.
Yeah, so Reimagine, just a couple of weeks ago, and it was an event focused on the education space and really looking at how hybrid schooling, hybrid learning is critical to everything we do. So, as you start to see, we have access to digital portfolios, we have access to allow teachers to share data, and it's trying to do that in a way, as I mentioned before, where technology is not in the way, it is the supported way to try and achieve your learning goals. And so if you go take a look online, you could see, you can watch the keynotes, you can watch the event. It was absolutely spectacular. We talked a lot about skilling and Accelerate America as well. It's just a commitment from the company, from our leaders in this space. And we have many folks who work at Microsoft who are ex-CIOs of school administrators, school systems, excuse me. We have administrators. We have folks who lived in this for 20, 30 years, who now have come to use those industry skills and say, look, you've got assets, but you need to apply them here. Let me give you guidance and really steer the best way. So you'll hear from all those folks in the event. And it was just about preparing students for the future, accessibility for everyone.
In your voice, it just can't be missed, your passion for education and for paying it forward and for how much education has probably opened that way for you. And it's really wonderful to hear what you're doing and how much you want to continue to do when it comes to bringing equity in education and equity in tech education and STEM. And you know, I really commend you for that. So let's talk a little bit about the future of AI and mitigating some of those future risks. So we speak a lot about technology and techno-solutionism and the long-term impacts of technology on society. And it's something that we've got to pay attention to, because I always say the thing about AI is not what we know, but what we don't know. And we are yet to really understand the long-term impacts of this technology. And while I'm super passionate about all the great things, I'm very passionate about precision health, because I think for me, when you cross 50, you start to think about health just a little more, and just the things that we can do with this piece of this suite of technology. So what are some of the actions at Microsoft to help mitigate future AI risks? And can you share those examples?
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. There is, with as much power comes as much potential challenge and risk here. And we've been out in the market, in government meetings, addressing heads of state, because there's multiple factors and vectors to how do we make AI not replace humans, but enable humans. And one of those aspects is, what we believe as a company is that, the Geneva Convention were rules set in place, 1864 around war, and how those were affected, who were in or out. We believe that a similar approach, a digital Geneva Convention, needs to be created, where governments, technology sector, there's agreements, there's policy, there's guardrails, and there's transparency. And so we work very hard from our president, Brad Smith's office. He goes out to try and really enlist and ensure that we're driving that first important pillar of global agreement, global acceptance, and global accountability. I think secondarily, it comes back to we need balance in the system. So just as much as we have folks who may, intentionally or accidentally, impact folks' privacy or human rights or their access to financial aid or to loans, we need to have equity and balance in that system. And so, I talked briefly with the founder of Data for Black Lives, Yeshi Milton. Just listening to her explain what they do in their organization, which was born out of MIT Labs, they come in and provide communities, activists, data science, and capabilities, because you're outgunned, you're outnumbered. You may walk into a meeting inside your local municipality, and they may say, we need to remove this type of housing and put up this type of housing, and here's my data science report to show it, backed by a developer, backed by a large company. And you have community activists who don't have access to that. So Data for Black Lives walks in and says, well, hold on a second. Data can tell any story. Let me tell you potentially a non-biased story. Let me tell you another perspective. Let me bring diversity to that. So I think there's equity and balance, and we have to keep investing in organizations like what you're doing at UVA and what Yeshi's doing at Data for Black Lives to continue to bring more access to those that would never be able to build, a model or understand that much data. And then I would just say that, educating people, and you talked about this, right? Educating that person that they're the provider of their data, and they have to decide if they want to do that and what that means to do it, and how do you get the return on that investment of giving your data. And right now, it's very much a world of bring it all in. I'm the gatherer of that. And I don't generally think as much about the provider and what's the balance and the fair trade there. I think when you think across those aspects, plus just absolute rules that just need to be, when we don't know things, you said, the unknown, our company just put facial rec on hold, right? We don't want to there's too much unknown, there's too much potential for misuse. We're on hold until we figure that out. So I think you have to have the 3 pillars, and you have to be bold enough to adjust real time.
Definitely.
So many of these things land on your plate as the data activist. What are you addressing with the School of Data Science and the university more broadly about how do we prepare? How do we prepare for the risks in this field? How do we protect against misuse of the technology moving forward? I'd love to hear, boots on the ground on how we're building that capability in the next batch of brilliant people.
Definitely, and really a fantastic question. So it's always, as I say, it's about ethical vigilance, and it's about stretching the ethical imagination of the data scientists. And it's for the data scientists to understand that questions such as justice and equity and diversity and inclusion really stretch your consciousness and your thinking. So it's about perspective, and to build the perspectives that allow the data scientists or technologists or just anyone working with data to live in that ethical moment. It means that they've got to understand different experiences. So it's really about broadening the cosmology of data science and understanding that collective intelligence, emotional intelligence, are all diverse intelligences, are all critical to what we're doing. Neurodiversity is something that we've got to think about within the context of technology as well. So I always say that, an algorithm is not a simple computational formula. An algorithm is a legacy, because an algorithm can create or deny access, create or deny opportunities, create or deny resources. An algorithm could really change the trajectory of a life in real time. And what we've been seeing in many communities would be that algorithms are also at the moment creating injustices, algorithmic injustice, and an algorithm can create a lifetime, a generation or intergenerational trauma in communities as well. So we've got to reach to the point where we understand why diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice are so critical, why due diligence and due process and duty of care are so critical to designing an algorithm, and so critical across the life cycle from design to deployment. And it's also, for me, just bringing that understanding and doing all that I can do to really engage communities and to spread the conversation and to get more voices in the conversation, and to really bring us up to speed on the fact that that data rights are probably going to be the civil rights issue of this generation and any generation moving forward. And something that I always say would be, we don't ever want to get to the point where we've got to create an algorithm to teach us what it means to be human again. So those are the things that I see. And I will say that, again, at the School of Data Science, I really believe we have this commitment to ethical AI, to responsible technology, and to really building future leaders who understand the power of an ethical framework and the power of an ethical approach to the ways in which we design technology, and of course, the power of diversity, equity, and inclusion to really ensuring we design technology that look like all of us and just not some of us. And my final question to you would be, you're an extraordinary speaker. This has been an extraordinary and most engaging conversation, and you're just a brilliant and visionary leader. What advice would you have to those who are listening at this moment, if they are thinking of ways in which they can lead and lead responsibly and ethically within technology?
Well, you've expanded my ethical imagination today, and I hope and I know you have many others. And I think that's where I would say what's highly sought after, it's highly valued, and what's becoming highly expected, wherever you may land, if you decide to take your skills to a commercial company, a nonprofit, is that this is how we do business. This is how we solve problems. This is how we all increase the capability of the 8 billion humans on this planet. And it is by not assuming that the technology will handle bias, will handle drift, will give us lineage and transparency. It's about upfront, proactively, and intentionally driving those things into your discussions. And it has to be from the broadest perspective and the widest aperture, which is why I love when we talk and we review potential projects, there's an attorney, there's a scientist, there's a philosopher, there's people of all socioeconomic background, there's gender, there's all levels of diversity intentionally. Because, to your point, if we just make an assumption that the data is good, the data doesn't start with bias, we just add that and we add the model, which we know is not true. You can't assume and move forward and say, I trust that this will take care of itself. It's intentionality, and it's a broadest aperture you can when you have these conversations up front. So that's how you lead. That's what's becoming expected. And I think, I'm grateful that we got to spend this time together. I know that we're very fortunate to have people like you who can continue to carry this entire movement forward. I'll do my part here in Microsoft United States right now, because I think the future is bright, really is.
John, thank you so very much. And I think this is the moment where we hand it back to Wendell. Thank you again. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you. We do have two questions from the audience. One from Carrie. What responsibility do you think creators of open source AI components, GPT-3, et cetera, have for ensuring ethical use of their technology?
What a wonderful question, which hits a little close to home for our company. We had some tech get used in a horrible, horrible way. It's very difficult. And I think that the answer becomes, you can't step away and say, however this gets used, it's not my problem. So if you look at what we do is, if there's some technology, if there's some research, it has to be public. It has to be opened up. That's why we're the #1 world contributor to open source and GitHub on the planet. That's what we do. We put everything out there. We have GitHub, which is what we acquired because we knew that you have to live on trust and transparency. And you have to have the framework in place to react and respond immediately, which is what we did when we found out about that technology misuse. We react, respond immediately. Can we shut it down? Is it running on our stuff? Is it, first, is it even accurate? And what we did was we said, look, public domain research, we absolutely have to bring light to this unfair negative use of that. So I don't think that, to answer, coming back to the question, it has to be you stay attached to it, not that you create it, throw it in a repo somewhere, and then you're, you wash your hands of responsibility. Renee, any thoughts?
I think you handled that expertly, John, so I'm going to leave it right there.
Great. All right, our next question from our Dean, Phil Bourne. Great session. I've started to think about a facet of AI I had not considered before, what it means to be human in a world where hardware, software does so many tasks better than we do. What is my role in the world when an existing computer program programs better than I do, touching mental health, psychology, et cetera? How do we deal with this will not be equitably distributed?
Phil throwing us a real tough one today.
Well, I can just jump in here, and I will say, I understand that challenge, but the challenge is this. It's not that the computer can program better than we can do, because the computer is not programming itself. It's still being programmed by a human. This is why I think I'm so committed to collective intelligence and really understanding the power that we have together with technology. So I think when we think about things like mental health and psychology, we're seeing that technology is really bringing some new challenges in there for us when it comes to mental health, when it comes to psychology, particularly among teenagers, when we think of the impact of Facebook and particularly Instagram on teenage girls, and how that is making so many teenagers question themselves and question who they are, their future, and the fact that they may not be an influencer at 15 is something that is of concern, things that we did not have to deal with. But I think at the moment, collective intelligence and emotional intelligence will be the greatest assets to digital intelligence. So we need each other, the human and the technology.
Spot on. And the technology that is sort of lighting up the headlines these days is some of this AI infused what we call autopilot. But you write a line of code, you write a first line of your function, and the AI is injecting right there now. You can go do this, try autopilot, and it'll give you the rest of your function. And you're like, well, how's that happening? But what's really happening behind the scenes is it's a model trained on, guess what? Human written code sitting in GitHub. So to Renee's point, right, it's still us enabling the machine to enable us better. And as long as it goes human, machine, human, and I agree with you wholeheartedly that our emotional intelligence, our creativity, our artistic nature, our lived experiences will be the differentiator as well. So I feel good right now as long as it's human, machine, human, and we need to keep our eyes on that.
I'm going to combine the next two questions together. With the frenetic pace of work today, especially with ramping technology modernization, how do you make the space for conversations like this with business executives, connecting this to mission and business value? And then associated with that, are there any industry groups you recommend bringing organizations together to discuss these issues?
Maybe I can take the first part, Renee, if the second part looks good. I would say 10 years ago, you worked very hard to make that space. You had to walk in there and give a base. You had to explain what ethics was. You had to say, you would try to attach it to, revenue, bottom line, risk. A lot of these conversations happened with legal and procurement departments. Fast forward to now, these are board level discussions. These are first line manager discussions. These are absolutely more often than not the discussion that if you're not walking in and declaring that this is a center pillar to what we're going to work on together, that's not going to work out well for you. So I would say, is it easy? No. Is it always there? No. But having the right training, having the right understanding of the market, of what capabilities are out there, and then hopefully, these groups that maybe Renee could speak a little bit about. It allows you to bring that conversation at the forefront, and I would say it's more expected than it is shoehorning in today, at least from my perspective, today in the United States.
And I will just add, and because I know we're out of time, there are many organizations out there that are bringing these conversations to our businesses and institutions. Of course, the work in the community itself of ethicists and activists, very, very strong. And of course, I just want to say that coming up in the School of Data Science, we're supposed to have a speaker series that really looks at all of these different questions and really takes that conversation more and more into the community. So there's great work happening, and just keep tuned in and to the School of Data Science, and it's going to be trending somewhere soon that we're doing that kind of work. So thank you so much again, John, and thank you, Wendell, and your amazing team.
Thank you, Renee. Thank you, Wendell.
Yeah, I'll put a plug in for, if you check our website for professional education, there may be some upcoming workshops on the topic of mission, culture, and ethics as well. So thank you, John. Thank you, Renee. This was a great way to end our first Friday series of the year. We will share the recording with all registered, and stay tuned for next year's programming, but we'll probably take a break in January, and hope everyone has a great holiday. Thanks again, John, and thanks, Renee.
Take care. Bye-bye. Happy holidays, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.